Hi, everybody. I'm Jessie Haas. I am the National Director of Programs at PEP Partners. This is our monthly news roundup for volunteers and prospective volunteers. I would love to know if there are folks watching and listening. If that's the case, give me a thumbs up, a hello, a hi typed in, mostly because I'm starting here a couple of minutes early. So we've got some time to just see who's out there. Also, it helps me know because if there are people watching live, then I can make sure to get your feedback on some of the topics I'm sharing today. And of course, you are welcome to ask questions, make comments, and so on as I move through this. So again, this is the monthly roundup of news for PEP Partners volunteers and prospective volunteers. My name is Jessie Haas. I'm the National Director of Programs. And this live is really all about sharing really relevant, very current information that applies directly to people who are out in their communities visiting with their pets or people who are getting ready to do that. So the Therapy Animal Program staff and I, we sat down virtually, of course, and talked about what are the things that volunteers are asking the most about in the last 30 days. What are they sharing concerns about most frequently? What are the trends and topics that they are interested in? And my goal is really to take those 4 or 5 items that we saw or heard most in the last 30 days and share them out via this Facebook Live. Some of the information that I share you might see in written communications on our website and our social media posts, but the goal is also to make sure that we're sharing emerging information. So some things aren't going to be in your written communications, and we want to get them out to you via this live. I should say before I dive in too that we will be doing these on or around the first of the month. Today's August 2nd. The first landed on a Sunday. So that's why we opted to do it today, but for the rest of the year, they should be on the first of the month, and we'll always cover information from the preceding 30 days. So with that said, again, make sure that you make comments throughout. I'd love to address some of those as we go through. So first up, the item we hear most, not surprisingly, in the last 30 days is PEP Partners back to normal? So we've got volunteers reaching out saying, hey, I'm visiting. Is that normal? We've got volunteers reaching out saying, hey, my facility hasn't invited me back yet. Is that normal? And really our response to that, and we get dozens of questions like that every month, is, yeah, it's all kind of normal. We're seeing different things in different places. There are some facilities, of course, who are just not letting teams back in. They've sort of shut down any therapy animal programming. We have some facilities who are totally back to normal. Their therapy animal program and the way PEP Partners interacts at their facility is exactly the same as it was in 2019. The majority of facilities, I would say, though, are somewhere between those two spectrums. So they are inviting teams back, and they need those teams really more than ever, given what everybody's been through for the last 18 months. But they're doing their therapy animal programming or their visitation with some amendment. So some facilities might have a team in, but they're keeping them stationary. So instead of that team moving through the facility, they are putting them in one place, and they are maybe interacting with a limited number of clients, patients, or students, whatever it might be. In other facilities, they may have formerly had group visits where 4 or 5 teams would come at the same time, and maybe now they're having those 4 or 5 teams sort of spread themselves out in different shifts over the course of the month because they're trying to keep the numbers of people together a little bit lower. So these are some of the amendments we're seeing. But when you look at our volunteer opportunities directory, which is where facilities post volunteer opportunities for our teams to respond to, we have seen a tripling in the last month of postings to that directory. So again, facilities need teams and want teams more than ever. It just might be with some amendments. If you are interested in finding open facilities, those that are looking for teams, you can find that volunteer opportunities directory by logging into your volunteer center account. If you scroll down to a little bit on the homepage, once you log in, just scroll down a little bit, you'll see a section called Pet Partners in My Area. And one thing you can do there is click on Visit Opportunities, and it already populates all of those facilities that are posting for volunteers in your area. You can mess around with the filters. You can look at facilities that are farther away, closer to you. You can look at facilities that are open to certain species. You can look at facilities that are healthcare related versus education related, whatever. So you can mess around with that, but you can definitely see all the facilities in your area that are asking for teams. I'm located in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I just looked at opportunities in my city, and I think there's like 16 different facilities looking for teams right now within 20 miles of my home. Second update. We've got a lot of volunteers reaching out and saying, hey, my registration end date for my team registration isn't what I expected it to be. And most of the time that's because you are a team who received a 1-year extension on your team registration. During the height of the pandemic, we gave a free 1-year kind of tacked on to the end of every single registration of teams who were active at that time. And it didn't apply just to teams who were due for immediate renewal. Again, it was for anybody who was active at the time we made that announcement. So this might not apply to you if you're a very new team who just became registered, but if you were registered in 2020, this applies to you. So as an example, if you became a new team in September 2019, you might be expecting that your renewal is due September 2021. However, you might have logged in and saw that that's not the case, and you're seeing a later date. That's because you received that extension. And we did that because we knew a lot of folks were going to have a challenge getting a renewal evaluation for some number of months. We also know a lot of teams weren't using their registration. They weren't visiting, so they weren't able to take advantage of all the benefits. So we thought it was just the right thing to do to give that extension. So it's always a good idea to check your registration end date occasionally, but especially now since some of them have moved. In order to check your registration end date, you log into the Volunteer Center account, you click on registration, and click into the team registration in question. So for me, it'd be Jessie and my dog JJ, and I can see all the relevant dates when I click on that registration. Just to piggyback on that a little bit, because another topic that's come up a lot is around evaluation availability for renewing teams, but this also does apply to new teams, at least indirectly. If you log in and you find out, well, my registration end date isn't quite as immediate as I thought it was, that's great, but don't wait until the very last minute to take care of your renewal evaluation. And that's because we're living in kind of an ever-changing world, and that applies to our evaluation availability. So it ebbs and flows in terms of slots that are available in your community for teams to get that renewal evaluation done. Some weeks we are seeing lots of evaluation slots. There were a couple of weeks in June where we actually surpassed the number of evaluation slots for the same period in June 2019, so before the pandemic ever happened. So kudos to our team evaluators for getting back out there, getting events on the calendar. They know there are teams waiting for renewal evaluations or new evaluations. But even though we're exceeding in some weeks, other weeks we're not seeing those numbers. And additionally, we do have a bumper crop of new teams wanting to get evaluated, which makes sense. A lot of them spent time during the pandemic taking their coursework. They also spent time training their animal, kind of getting ready to evaluate this year, which means that there's demand on the slots that we do have because very few new teams were able to come through in 2020. So great if you're not due for renewal as early as you thought, but also don't leave it till the last minute. You may need to be a little bit flexible about when you get your renewal evaluation done, even with that extension. So I'm going to pause there and see if I can see the comments coming through. Let me scroll down a little bit. I see some folks from Denver, Reno, Kansas, Buffalo. Awesome. Thanks for letting me know you all are here. I appreciate it. While I am scrolling through, just on that first topic around returning to visit and normalcy, it would also be nice to see in the comments from folks who are here, if you are visiting, if things feel like normal, what are some of the amendments you're seeing, maybe in terms of vaccination, maybe in terms of some of the things I shared around being more stationary or not being able to visit as many people. Put them in the comments because I think there is a lot of interest for people to kind of share what looks normal in their area. Okay, so somebody asked here, I have moved and my registration has expired. How can I renew if I'm no longer close to that location? So you can get a renewal evaluation anywhere. So if you moved from Minneapolis to Chicago, there's no reason you can't resume your volunteerism there and get an evaluation in Chicago, just as an example. Your location doesn't matter to us in terms of your registration or where you get evaluated. If you have expired, and this is a great thing to remind folks on, because that did happen to a lot of people where they kind of let it go amidst everything that's been happening. In a lot of cases, if you expire, you can join back in as long as you get evaluated with no issue. It's almost the same as renewing. It's almost like you just took a break. Now, if it's been a long period of time, say 2 years since you were last registered, then you might have some additional hoops to jump through. But if you just expired very recently, come back and join us. And if you have questions about how to do that, you can contact us if you've expired. Maybe somebody can throw in the comments, one of our staff who's watching, throw in the contact us link for reaching out to us about your specific situation. But relocation doesn't matter in terms of getting back started. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Somebody already answered that comment. I apologize. So somebody wants us to put in there how to find local volunteer opportunities. So it's pretty difficult to directly link to that because it lives in your, or the easiest way to get it, I should say, is in your volunteer center account. So when you log into your volunteer center account with Pep Partners, we can put that link in. Once you're logged in, you have your own customized home page. And if you scroll down just a little bit on that home page, you'll see a section called Pep Partners in my area. You can't miss it. And there's a big box there that says there are X number of opportunities in your area. It will already populate and tell you the number that are in your area. When you click that box, then you'll be able to see the specific lists of facilities and a description and the contact information and all the further details. So again, log into your volunteer center account, go to Pep Partners in my area. That's how you'll see those opportunities local to you. All right, I'm going to move on. I have my third update here, and then I've got one more. The third, this is mostly for new teams. What we've been seeing a lot this summer is new teams reaching out to us saying, and this means perspective, you haven't gone through the whole process yet, saying, hey, I see an evaluation, or I know there's one taking place in my area, but I'm unable to sign up for it. The reason for that most likely is you don't yet have an in-progress registration started. So you can't sign up for the evaluation unless if you start that registration. So the first step is to set up a volunteer center account, which most people do have. What they don't realize is they actually have to start that team registration, which you do by, when you're in your volunteer center account, on that homepage, there's a registrations button. Click that, and that's where you can start the registration. To start it is really simple. It's usually just asking for your name, your animal's name, species, things like that. It doesn't take very long. But once we have at least that initial information, we can allow you to enroll in an evaluation. The reason we want you to do that step first is because when you sign up for an evaluation, the first thing your evaluator is going to want to do as they plan for their day is know how many animals you have. Sometimes people want to evaluate with multiple animals in the same day. They want to know what kind of species you have. And so we don't want people signing up until the evaluators have access to that information. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to complete the majority of your registration before signing up, All you need to do is start it, and then between the time you start and the time you evaluate, you can take care of some of the other registration items like completing the handler's coursework. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. And then the last update I have, and then I'll circle back to some of the comments, is we're hearing a lot from folks who are volunteers or prospective volunteers saying, hey, I want to connect with people in my community. How do I do that? How do I know what other volunteers are out there? There's a couple of different ways to do that. One is to see if there's a community partner or a community group in your area. That is a local group of Pep Partners volunteers who work together to schedule visits or work together to schedule evaluations or just be a source of social support as you go through this volunteer journey. Partners and groups are the same thing. It's just partners are a little bit larger in number, groups are a little bit smaller in number. You can find out if there's one in your area. Again, I feel like a broken record, but you can go into your volunteer center account, and when you're on the home page, go back down to that Pet Partners in my area, and you can search for a community group or partner in your area. Another way to connect is via a somewhat new Facebook community that we have. It's a private group. It is specifically for volunteers or prospective volunteers, meaning the prospective volunteer would at least have to have a volunteer center account set up. And it is called Therapy Animal Visits with Pet Partners on Facebook. We'll drop the link in. But unlike our business page or our general Pet Partners Facebook page, which you're probably connected to if you're watching this live, that is for all sorts of people: donors, advocates, the general public, supporters, facilities, whereas this private group is really meant for volunteers to connect with one another. So it doesn't necessarily get at the desire to have other volunteers to meet with in person, but it is a way to connect with other volunteers who are experiencing the same things you are. And in some cases, people are using that group to make local connections. So in the last few weeks, we've seen posts like, are there any teams in southeastern Wisconsin? Are there any teams in Ohio? And people jump in and say, hey, yeah, I'm in that community, or hey, there's a community partner in that group, in that geographic area. So it is a good way to make those in-person connections. But even outside of that, at least you can connect with one another about topics that are interesting to you. So we've had posts like, I do read with me visits, and I want some new ideas on books to bring. That's a great discussion to have in there, and lots of ideas were shared. Somebody just posted something about getting more evaluation set up in their community and how they could get more volunteers to help with that. We have people sharing photos from their visit, so it can also be kind of a source of inspiration. But I highly recommend that you connect in that group if you are looking to make some more connections, whether it's locally or more broadly and nationally. I'm going to drop that link in here for people who want to join that community. Should be there now. So you can cut and paste that into your browser, join it. I think we have something like 2,500 members at this point, all volunteers or prospective volunteers. All right, I'm seeing some chats in here about evaluations. Let me just read and get caught up. You guys are fast typers. All right, so I see some people again asking about availability, in that they're having a hard time finding evaluations in their area, or seeing what evaluations are available. And then I see some folks saying they're having a hard time getting space. So let me cover both of those topics. If you are somebody looking for an evaluation, the best thing you can do is go to your registration. So again, log into your volunteer center account, navigate to registrations. One of the steps in the registration is the evaluation. When you click on that step, you can then navigate to the evaluation calendar where you can see things in your area. So that's one way to do it. And then if you see one and you're already in your registration, you can pretty quickly sign up for it right from there. If you're having a hard time finding one, meaning you know how to get to the calendar, you're looking in your area and there aren't any, please do reach out to us. We as a staff have been working really hard to keep track of folks that are unable to find an evaluation and serve them in some alternative ways. So we can either leave you on a list to let you know when one does come up in your area. We can connect you with an evaluator who maybe doesn't have something on the calendar, but we can put you in touch with them so they can keep you posted. We're also doing things like we're figuring out, oh, there's a team here and a team here and a team here. Let's get an evaluator to them, even if the evaluator's having to travel an hour or two. So we're working really hard to make sure everybody gets serviced. The contact us link is already in the comments, so use that and let us know. We really want to match you with evaluation slots that are available. In terms of evaluators finding space, yes, everybody should be aware of this, even if you're not an evaluator. So one of the reasons that evaluations have been hard to come by is not because evaluators aren't willing to evaluate, it's because space is really hard to find in a COVID-19 world. And that's because even if buildings or locations are opening up for service or to provide services, they may be only kind of doing the essentials. So if an evaluator used to evaluate at a church or a library, which is really common to use sort of community rooms like that, those churches or libraries might say, you know what, we're open for business, but we're not going to be doing that kind of business. We're not going to allow outside groups to use our space. And then the evaluator doesn't have a space to use. So just so that we're all empathetic to the challenge of being an evaluator during COVID-19, that's something they're running into quite a bit. Somebody did give a great idea that we are allowing outdoor evaluations right now, so that's a possibility to kind of open up some different venues that maybe we wouldn't have used in a pre-pandemic world, because there's just obviously a lot more outdoor space than indoor space in this time that's available. If you are a team who's doing an outdoor evaluation, there haven't been a lot of them, but if you sign up for one, just make sure you talk with your evaluator about what that process looks like, because for some teams, an outdoor evaluation just isn't going to be appropriate. For certain species, it might not be okay. For certain animals, an outdoor environment might be way distracting and too much, so it's not the right fit for everybody, but it is something we've introduced to try to get more evaluation events on the calendar. Just looking through comments. Those are all my kind of news roundup updates. So again, we went over, are things back to normal? That's the number one question we're getting. The second question is about evaluation availability, which we've talked a lot about. Checking your registration end dates. Don't forget to do that. Especially if you've kind of not stayed as connected with pet partners during the pandemic, make sure you check your registration end dates, because those may have moved. And then I also shared the Facebook community that you can join that is private for volunteers or prospective volunteers. I'm not seeing very many comments, additional comments come through, so I think I'm going to close it there. Join us on the first of every month. We will always be looking at what has emerged in the previous 30 days or so for our volunteers. I hope this was helpful, and see you all soon.